I'm Kevin Glass with townhall.com. We're live with Grover Norquist at CPAC. Grover, how are you?
Good to be with you.
And you were just on a panel discussion discussing the future of spending in America. Do you want to kind of summarize some of the remarks that you made there?
Yeah, the topic was twofold. It was the Tea Party and it was spending. And the reason I thought that was very interesting was, one, we were talking about how the Tea Party came about as a reaction to the overspending of Obama, Reid, and Pelosi, and what do we need to do next? So, and the two are linked. The Tea Party movement is the group that disciplines politicians for spending too much. I run Americans for Tax Reform. We discipline politicians who raise taxes, or who break their pledge, or refuse to take the pledge. The National Rifle Association, I serve on their board, they tend to discipline people on being good on the Second Amendment rights. The Right to Life movement, the homeschooler movement, each sort of draw a line in the sand for politicians, say don't cross that or you have an argument with us. Up until the Tea Party's creation by Obama.
Spontaneity.
Well, Obama, Reid,
yes.
and Pelosi created it. Yeah. It wasn't any one guy. It was their attack, their assault on America and the economic prospects for America. They really scared people scared them straight into political activity. So now there is a group like the NRA on gun issues. It's the Tea Party on spending issues. And that really completes the Reagan coalition, because until then, you sort of had this corral with one gate open. And a politician could do everything you wanted except spend too much, and there was no discipline for spend too much, and we ended up with real problems.
So do you see the Tea Party as kind of the new, I mean, they're not silent anymore, but the new silent majority, in that they're those people who are fed up with spending and they know that it's time for action and that it's gone on for too long?
Yes and no. I think there are a majority of Americans, people who agree with the Tea Party on limiting the size of government. But if it's a silent majority and nobody sees it, it might as well not exist. And for years, most Americans wish the government wouldn't spend too much, but it wasn't a vote-moving issue. Nobody lost an election because they earmarked. Nobody lost an election because they spent too much. In 2010, primaries and general, you saw people lose elections that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 3 years ago, they'd have been bragging in the campaign about earmarking and pork barrel spending and vote for me because of all the spending I do. The Tea Party changed that, and that's a dramatic change in American politics that I think will affect the next 25 years.
So do you see this as, I mean, the old hog in political science is a majority of Americans hate Congress but think their guy's all right. Do you think that that kind of opinion is shifting and that they're coming to realize that their guy is part of the problem and that it is time for a change?
The reason why people didn't like Congress was they didn't like the results of what Congress did. The reason they liked their congressman was he would come back and talk to them and tell them what they wanted to hear. And they couldn't tell how he voted in Washington because CBS, NBC, and ABC did not report how individual congressmen voted. And there wasn't an internet, and there wasn't talk radio that was willing to share with you how your congressman voted on things. And so you could live double lives. Like the guys in the movies with a wife on either side of the Straits of Gibraltar.
Yeah.
Nobody knew. And you could have one life in D.C. voting for big government and one life back in your district explaining that wasn't you. That's what's broken down. It started to break down in the 90s, which is how the Republicans got control of the House and Senate in the first place. That was with radio, talk radio. And then it completely broke down with Facebook and Twitter, and it's not just Egypt, it's not just Tunisia, it's the United States of America, where people are told, hey, your congressman did this. Well, you know what? He didn't mention that. He said he was fighting for less government and lower taxes, and I've now learned he votes with the Democratic leadership for higher taxes and more government. So that's changed. No longer can congressmen very well lead double lives. And the Democrats who lost in the House were the ones who did one thing in Washington and talked a different game to get elected, caught up with them.
So do you think, you spoke earlier about the formal nature of ATR and NRA and groups like that in keeping Congress honest. Do you see formal groups coming out of the Tea Party movement, or because it seemed to me that whenever formal organization has been attempted, it's kind of been rejected by the Tea Partiers?
I think what you might see is groups like Americans for Tax Reform, handing out information or making information available on the web saying, here's who's voted for tax increases and who hasn't. Thousands of Tea Party leaders can access that information and use it themselves. Citizens Against Government Waste, run by Tom Schatz, he can put up here, and does, on their website, here's who does earmarks, here are some of the facts about the earmarks. So any Tea Party activist or Tea Party leader can access that and share it. So what national groups can do is aggregate information and make it easy to share. So the Americans for Tax Reform doesn't tell any Tea Party leader, you should be against the guy who raised your taxes. They don't need to hear that from me. We just tell you, here's who raised your taxes. You decide what to do with that information. And the same thing with spending. So getting that information clearly out to people, and a lot of state think tanks are now doing just that with transparency and with ratings on how people voted. So what's been available for a while in Washington to track your senator and your congressman is now available with the Mackinac Institute in Michigan, so you can see how all the Michigan legislators vote. And I think that from a Tea Party's perspective, the more transparency, the clearer it is who votes how and what they do, the more likely we are to have constitutional government.
And do you see some of the Republican establishment has been reaching out to the Tea Partiers and the new Tea Party members? Do you see that as a movement to try and appropriate that momentum, or do you see it as a genuine mea culpa maybe on the, say, the George W. Bush big spending years?
Well, I think a lot of Republicans wanted to vote correctly, but didn't think there was any penalty for not voting correctly, and there were clear penalties in D.C. if you didn't go along. So they were pushed in the wrong direction. Two, when they were in the minority, they had no responsibilities, and they weren't sure whether, look, if you know if you vote the right way, there's someone to cover your back, people just get braver. They're just braver if they know they're not stepping out on thin ice. They need to know that if they step out, and that's why Chris Christie, the governor of New Jersey, is so important. He walked out on the ice and didn't fall through into the lake. And all the other Republican governors go, can you do that? Can you take on the trial lawyers? I didn't know that. Well, that's an option, because many of them had internalized lessons from 2 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, about some guy who took on the unions and got crushed. Well, that'd be silly, wouldn't it? So, but if you can step out on the ice, and the ice can bear your weight, and it's thick enough, many governors are now following the leadership of Chris Christie. It's not that he had to explain it to them or yell at them. He just showed that it could happen. That made a big difference.
So you see that as maybe the Tea Party movement empowering politicians to be able to grab the sacred third rails of politics and be able to, I guess, facilitate some kind of change, like Chris Christie, who you would think would be excoriated by these traditional power groups, and he's taking them on.
The Tea Party movement says there is a group that will reward those who fight against wasteful spending. Whereas before, the people who were the recipients of wasteful spending would reward you for wasting the money on them and punish you for taking away their goodies. And there was nobody other than sort of the general populace that would go, very nice, but they'd forget to vote on that subject. The Tea Party movement translates what most Americans feel, please don't spend our money unwisely, spend less of it, into concrete political activity. There is somebody who will remind voters where you were on the spending issue when they vote.
You did mention social media as one of the empowering movements for the Tea Party. Do you think that in the future we're going to see, because Chris Christie, for example, became incredibly popular with his YouTube videos taking on these power groups. Do you see that as continuing to be a major factor?
Absolutely.
Is that, I mean, to me, that's people clearly responding to the phenomenon of someone speaking honestly about spending.
There's all the difference in the world between somebody telling you that they heard somebody tell them that Chris Christie had said something cool, and being able to see what he actually said and judging for yourself. That's a powerful message. I understand why it worked. I could do that. Every other governor, I assure you, has been watching Chris Christie's videos.
Great. This has been a great interview with Grover Norquist for townhall.com live at CPAC. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, good to be with you.